Hello, this is Jose Luis here at Parametric Camp, and welcome to another video in this series, Web-Based Drawing Apps, in which it looks like we're going to incrementally, over the course of multiple videos, we're going to build up features into a vector-based or vector-inspired online drawing app. If you remember from the previous videos, we already built this app where we can draw simple shapes and we can actually change the color between them. And those shapes were reduced to either ellipses, rectangles, and or lines, right? So what I would like to do in this video is I would like to teach you how to implement a multi-click and drag polyline feature. So that's going to look something like this. I'm going to press P, and then if I press P, you can see that now I am drawing with these multiple clicks. I'm drawing a polyline. So I'm going to finish the polyline by pressing enter. And now the polyline is part of my document. I'm going to switch colors to orange. And I'm going to show you another feature that I'm going to implement in this video, which is that as I am drawing the polyline is going to smartly recognize if I am close to the first point that I drew, and if I am, it's going to immediately snap to the first vertex of the polyline, and it's going to let me start a new polyline. So it's going to make drawing closed polylines much easier. All right? Beautiful. So let's get hands-on and let me teach you how to implement drawing polylines. Beautiful. Before we actually start implementing the polyline drawing, I would like to do something. First of all, I would like to explain that we're going to start from exactly the same project where we left it in the previous video, where we created the basics of this vector drawing app. And if you remember, the app did look something like this. I can create ellipses, rectangles, lines, and I can change the color, etc., etc. However, something that we didn't quite do in the previous, and I've called this project 4.2, which is probably going to be the name of this video, correct? So something that we didn't quite do and we're going to need for this video is the fact that all the shapes that we were drawing had this kind of transparent feel to them, and they did not have an outline. So now for polylines, what I would like to do is I would like to make sure that as I'm drawing the polyline, there is a stroke color for the polyline that I can clearly see. And optionally, probably, I may also want some kind of fill color for the polyline, all right? So in that case, what we're going to do is we're going to modify the previous project and make sure that we are a bit more consistent with certain things. For example, I'm going to replace shape color, all instances of shape color. I'm going to go here and say Control H, and everything that is called shape color, I want to name it now fill color. All right, and I'm going to go through the entire project and I'm going to replace all instances of fill color. All right, there you go. There you go. So I think we are good, and this should actually work very well again, right? And then if I export a file, now this JSON should have a fill color property with those values. And if I drag this JSON file, let me refresh this, and if I drag this JSON file, it loads correctly. Okay, so that's great. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to implement something very similar, but I'm going to call it stroke color. All right, and this one is always going to be, for the time being, until we improve this better, it's always going to be fully opaque. All right, and then what I would like to do is I would like to make sure that I'm going to change shape size, which I believe so far we were only using it for the width, for the width of these lines. So I'm going to change this and I'm going to call this, I'm going to rename it to stroke width. All right. And actually, I think I'm going to name it stroke W, because otherwise it's going to conflict with a P5 name. So I'm going to, yes, a stroke width, a stroke width, a stroke width, a stroke width. All right. And I think that's going to be it. And I'm going to change this to the value of 2, because otherwise it's going to be a lot. All right. So now I'm going to move this here. And then stroke color, right now we implemented it as a new variable, but it has no meaning yet. So what I would like to do is I would like to make sure that instead of no stroke, we do a stroke, and then here we do stroke color. All right. And then here, stroke weight is going to be stroke W. And then we're going to basically copy paste this for all the shapes that we and then fill is gonna have, this is going to be, because it's a line, it has no fill. All right, stroke weight. Then similarly, we may want to change this here, and for this, we're going to do no fill. All right. Okay, and then, so that should work. And I think that now, shape is not defined. What is shape? 54. Yes, fill, and this is going to be called fill color. All right. What? Yes, because we have 50 here, so that's probably going to be 2. All right. So now we have this, we have a rectangle, and we have a line. Okay, so things are looking better. But I think that if we export this now, J, you can see that now I have the new file that I exported, but you can see that the shapes do not, in the exported file, the shapes do not have the stroke width, the stroke color as part of their properties. So if I now try to drag and drop, sorry, where is this file? If I now try to drag and drop, it shows up, but it shows up because it has defaults. So what I actually need to do is I need to make sure that this information, the stroke width and the stroke color, is also saved to the JSON file. So where am I going to do that? So here, fill color, and then I'm going to call this stroke color is a stroke color, and stroke weight is that. So that looks good to me. And then for line, stroke color is going to be stroke color, and this is going to be stroke width. So that looks good. And then shapes are shapes. And then when I read them, I should be good, right? So for example, where did I increase the size? Yes. So let's say that I have this, and then I'm going to increase the size. Okay, so this is not okay. So no, so something is not working well. So stroke color, yeah, I should be doing shape dot, because I'm reading from the shapes. Exactly, I should be reading from the shapes like this and like this. This is what happens when you try to do things fast, you know. And then when I let go, fill color, stroke weight. Maybe I should call this stroke weight. Yes. There you go. Okay, and now I increase, and now that shape shows up like that, and the line shows up like that. If I save this to a JSON file and I reload this, they show up with the correct widths. Okay, so I think we're good. All right, so that is already working, which means that now in my JSON file and in my document model, every shape has all the information that it needs to properly render itself. That includes the fill color, that includes the stroke color, and that includes the stroke weight. All right, so all the information is embedded inside of each one of the shapes. All right, beautiful. I think with this, and let me try this again. I think with this, we're pretty ready to, yeah, let me try this again. Save, and then I'm going to open this, and then what is the file? And then I'm just going to, yeah, I'm going to load it, and it loads very well. Okay, fantastic. So with this, we have implemented now strokes in the shapes that we're drawing. At some point in the future, in these videos, we will also make something, implement something to change the color and change the width of the stroke a bit more programmatically. But for the time being, I just want to make sure that we had some lines that we could use to properly see how we were drawing polylines, okay? So I think with that, we're probably ready now to start implementing this idea of drawing a polyline. All right, let's take a look at how to do that. Well, where do we start? We probably want to start by the beginning is typically a good place to start, like they said in the movie. So if what we want to do is we want to implement a new mode to draw a new kind of shape that we didn't have before, this is going to be polyline, then the first thing we probably want to do is go to the key interaction part, where by pressing some of the keys, we change the mode of the shape that we were drawing. And then what we're going to do here is if we press the letter P, I'm going to create a new mode that is going to be called Polyline. All right. And then just for debugging, I think I'm going to already start in Polyline mode right away. So if I now go to the app, you can see that I get errors because I don't have Polyline mode. I don't know what to do, etc., etc., right? So, and then the next thing that I would like to do is I'm going to implement the basics of what this polyline mode could look like. Before we actually get into mouse interaction, adding points, whatever, one way that is typically good to start implementing these things is to prototype what this polyline mode would look like in a hard-coded way. What that means is that I'm going to imagine that I was already halfway through drawing the polyline, and I'm going to implement what I would need code-wise in order for this polyline to show up. And I'm going to do that all without mouse interaction, just to prototype the data structure that I'm going to be using for the polyline, if you will. So if I'm going to be drawing a polyline, what I would need somewhere in my code is to have a sense or a memory, if you will, of all the points that I have drawn or that I have clicked on the canvas so far up to the point where I am drawing. Imagine, again, I'm going to prototype, imagining that I'm halfway to drawing one of these polylines. Just like before, we had this variable called last clicked that we used for drag and drop operations. What I may want to do here is I may want to create another variable, and I'm going to call this, for example, shape points or something like that, which is going to be an array where I'm going to keep all the points that I have clicked so far. So I'm going to call this, for example, shape points, all right? It's going to be an array. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to store a bunch of points in this object XY format. So this is going to be an object with two properties, X and Y. And then I'm going to add another one and another one and another one, for example. And I think this is going to be like a square or something like this. All right. So I'm going to imagine, and again, I'm going to hard code this for the time being because I want to prototype myself being halfway through drawing one of these polylines. All right. So now I have a variable that contains a collection of the points that I have already clicked on. All right. Then what I would like to do is I would like to render those points as a polyline. So remember that in this for loop, we had a for loop for drawing all the shapes that we had in the document model, all right, in the shapes array. So that's not the one that I want to do. I want to draw in the one where we are currently interacting with the document, all right? Now, in this case, it's going to be slightly different because the kind of interaction that I want is I want to click once, then I want to click another time, another time, another time. I'm not going to be click and dragging for the polyline. Therefore, that's the reason why in this case, I'm not going to add my mode inside of the whether if the mouse is press conditional. I'm going to do it outside because I may want to still draw that polyline even though I'm not actively pressing the button at that point. So I'm going to draw here, draw polyline, and then I'm going to do here, if the shape is a polyline, then I'm going to try this out. So I'm going to change the stroke to the color. I'm going to change the stroke weight to the color. This is a wrong auto completion. So what I want is I will also like to change the fill to the current fill color that I'm using for the drawing. And then in P5.js, the way to draw a multiple point polyline is using this syntax where you notify to P5 that you want to start a shape. Then you call as many vertices with their coordinates as you want, and then you signal that you want to end the shape with this function. So this is a for loop where I'm going to go over all the points in this temporary array where I'm holding them, and I'm going to one by one draw them by their x and y coordinates. All right? So I'm going to save this, and then you can see that immediately already I get a polyline with a fill color for those 3 vertices that I had hard-coded. Okay? Beautiful. This is looking great so far. Now, as I said, imagine that I am halfway through drawing this polyline. Part of the interaction that I want is I want all the previous points that I have clicked on to show up as part of the polyline, but I also want, as I'm moving my mouse, to get a sense of where the next click or where the next point that I would click on would look like polyline-wise, if you will. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw all the vertices that I have in the array, but then I'm going to add the last one is going to be one where that is going to be where I'm currently holding my mouse. What that's going to make is it's going to create for this very nice real-time interaction of, oh, this is what it's going to look like if I click here or here or here. But you can see that right now the clicking is still not working, okay? All right, so let's take a look at how to implement that clicking. Let's start by looking at everywhere that we have mouse interactions, right? So let me restart this. So if I go here and I click to add a new vertex, the place that gets called first is mouse pressed, all right? And then mouse press, what you can see is that we're adding to last clicked, we're adding X, Y, and blah, blah, blah. So something that we can do is we can say, if the shape that we are at is a polyline, something that I will also want to do is I would like to add to the shape points array, I would also like to add the object representing where my mouse was, so that I keep adding vertices and vertices to this shape points array, okay? So let's try that. So if I do that and I click here, I still get this error. So actually, let's take a look at this error. So cannot read the properties of undefined, blah, 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 whatever. Well, long story short, we could try to debug this manually, but I'm going to cut to the chase. The problem that we have is that the other part that triggers when I click my mouse is the function called mouse released. So the first one that triggers is mouse pressed. I add the point to the array, that is fine. And then the next one is mouse released. If you remember from previous videos, in mouse release, what we did is that anytime I let the mouse go, I was assuming that I was in the middle of drawing a shape. And therefore what happened was I had this shape, and then depending on the shape mode, I would create a shape object of one type of or the other, ellipse, rectangle, line. And then at the very end, I ended up adding that shape to the document, all right? The problem here is that for polyline, because we want to have this continuous click, 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 click interaction, necessarily we may not want to add the polyline that we're working on to the document model for real forever. We may not want to add it yet every time we unclick. So what this means is that we don't want to add a case here where we say, if we are in polyline mode, then add the polyline yet. We want to do that purposefully at some point, right? And also what's happening is that because we don't have, when we're in polyline mode, because it's not an ellipse or a rectangle or whatever, the shape constant doesn't get assigned an object. It still is undefined. And therefore, if I do this thing here, let me add. I'm going to add here, and I'm going to see that if I go to the document, you can see that in shapes, the object that gets added is an object that is undefined because it has not been assigned anything. And that is what creates the error. So the way to fix this is by saying, if the shape is different than undefined, so if someone has assigned an actual shape to this, then add it to the document. If not, then just don't add a null or an undefined object. So now, I don't know if you can tell, but this is very cool. We are adding constantly more and more points to the shape. And if I actually click here, shape points, you can see that right now is 19 points, all the ones that I have clicked, all right? Which is pretty cool, all right? Great, fantastic. Now, what do we need to do now? Well, I mean, at this point, we can click all the points. We can make this as complex as we want, but there should be a way to actually take this polyline and make it now permanently part of the document and move on to a new shape. Excuse me, create a new shape. I don't know what that looks like, or create another polyline, etc., etc. So how could we do this? We're going to do it two different ways. One is going to be purposefully finishing the polyline. So that's going to be with some kind of key interaction. And then at the end of this video, what I would like to do is I would like to try to see if we can do some kind of snapping to the first point. So if I click and I'm very close to the first point in the array, I'm going to automatically shut down this polyline. All right, but we will do that by the end of the video. So how are we going to do this? Well, here in colors, in the key interaction part, what I'm going to do is I'm going to implement that if I press enter, then I'm going to finish the polyline. All right. So how are we going to do that? I'm going to go all the way here and I'm going to draw, for example, here, shapes. I'm going to add here shape interactions, for example. And I'm going to say here, if the key, and in P5 keys, we cannot really type if key equals enter. The way we do it in P5 is that we have this thing called key codes, which is a special variable for keys that don't have a character representation. For example, white space, backspace, the tab, and also the escape key and the enter keys. So if key code is going to be enter, and enter is basically a environment variable or a system variable that belongs to the P5 library. If key code is enter, then let me, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to basically do a couple things. I'm going to empty the, I'm going to create a new shape. So I'm going to call this shape. And then I'm going to here, I'm going to say the type is going to be, oh, and I'm sorry, and I forgot, I'm only going to do this if the shape mode is equal to polyline. All right, that was very important. So I'm going to create a shape object that I'm going to push to the document. All right, so the type is going to be shape mode, and then I'm going to add, for example, vertices equals shape points, and then fill color is the fill color, the stroke color is the stroke color, and the stroke weight is the stroke weight. All right, good. We are there. And then once we have created this shape object, I'm going to push it to the array of shapes in the document. All right, the document being, remember, this virtual database that we're using for storing all the shapes in. And then after that, I'm going to reset the points. I'm going to say the points that I was using to draw, I just want to empty them and start from scratch. All right, beautiful. So let's see if this works. I'm going to click here, here, and here, and then I'm going to press enter, and oops, the shape disappeared. All right. Okay, no panic, no panic. Let's see if we actually added it to the document. So I'm going to go to the console, I'm going to press doc, I'm going to inspect the doc variable, and you can see that in shapes, I have an object of the type polyline, it has the colors, and it has the 6 vertices. So this is looking good. Why did it disappear though? Well, it did disappear because if you remember, we had two main for loops in our main draw function. One was to draw the shapes that we were currently manipulating, and the ones draw shapes that we are currently manipulating, creating. All right. And so that was one, and we kind of added the polyline there. But then we had the other one, which was draw the shapes from the document. And for this one, we had the ellipse, the rectangle, the line, but we have not added a case for the polyline. So that's kind of what we need to do now. So what we need to do here is we need to say, if we are in a polyline, let's make anything that we knew that we require. Let's change everything we require so that we can draw that polyline that was stored in memory. So I'm going to change the stroke color, the stroke weight based on the shape. I'm going to change the fill color, and then I'm going to do the same thing. Begin shape, I'm going to go through all the vertices, and I'm going to end the shape. and that's it. And is this going to work? Let me try. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to press enter and boom, the polyline stays there. Can I draw another one? 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to press enter. The polyline stays there. Ta-da! This is awesome. It's working, I think. Beautiful. This is great. Okay, what do we need to do now? I think at this point it's probably going to be good to do some stress testing. What do I mean by that? We have implemented a new feature, and very often when we do this in apps that start becoming a bit more complex, it's common that this feature may not work in all possible scenarios, may break other things. So I'm going to try to now undo everything that I did to prototype this. So for example, I'm going to undo the fact that we already start with 3 points out of the box. So I would like to start with no points. I would also like to start from a shape mode that is not polyline. And then I'm going to basically use the app for a little bit. So I'm going to draw in an ellipse here, another ellipse here. I'm going to change to polyline. I'm going to draw a polyline, press enter, the polyline is there. I'm going to switch to line. I'm going to switch to another line. So it's looking good, right? But now let's try to misuse this. So for example, let's say I switch to polyline, all right? And halfway, instead of pressing enter, I'm going to switch to a different mode, like rectangle. What I see is what I expected. So the polyline disappears and it doesn't actually go into the document. I create a new rectangle, but now I'm finding it weird because the rectangle, I need to drag and drop it instead of 2 clicks, which is what I would do with the polyline. So the UI interaction is feeling a bit weird. Anyway, but now if I go back to polyline, what just happened here? I went back to the polyline that I had before. Why is that? Well, it turns out that when I switched from polyline to rectangle, I still had the array with the 3 vertices. And then when I switch back to polyline, the 3 vertices that I was using in shape points remain there. So I think something that I would need to implement is that whenever I switch to polyline mode, what I would like to do is I would like to make sure that I reset the array that had all these points from whoever was using it before me, correct? So let's see if now this works. I have an ellipse. I'm going to change to a polyline. I'm going to change to rectangle. The ellipse disappears. And then if I switch to polyline, I start from scratch again, all right? I press enter, the polyline stays there. I switch to rectangle. I make another one. I'm going to switch to ellipse. And then I switch to polyline and I start from another one. So things are looking all right. So you can see that by stress testing the app, I found a small bug that I could fix. Okay, beautiful. I think at this point we are ready to try to implement snapping to the first vertex in the polyline. So this is actually going to be fairly straightforward. So what we want is, as I am drawing a polyline, and whenever I click, what I want to do is if I click in a place that is close enough to the to the first point in the buffer that we're using, what I want to do is I want to detect that I am close to that, snap that vertex to the first one, and then close the polyline and add it to my document. The first place where I would like to do this is whenever I am detecting those mouse presses. So if you remember, right now here we have the function mouse press, and if I am in polyline mode, I always add this point, which is whatever the coordinates of my mouse is, right? So what am I going to do here? Well, I would like to slightly improve this and say, before I add any point, what I want to do is I want to check if where I am right now, mouse X and mouse Y, is close enough to the first point in the polyline, all right? So for example, I would like to say here, I'm going to define a variable. I'm going to say should snap, and I'm going to initialize that to false. And I'm going to say if the length of the points that I'm working with is greater than 0, if I have at least 1 point, okay? And at the same time, the distance between, the distance between mouse X and mouse Y and dist is a function that lives inside of P5.js. I could do this with the Pythagorean theorem, etc., but I'm just going to use a shortcut here. And then the X coordinate of the first point in the array and the Y coordinate in the first point of the array, if the distance is less than, for example, some kind of value, I'm going to say, for example, 20. If that is the case, then what I would like to do is I would like to say that should snap is going to be equal to true. All right. So this is the way that I'm going to do to detect whether if the last point should be snapping or not. And then I'm just going to should snap here. And all right, so let's see if this works. I'm going to start my polyline. 1, 2, 3, should snap, false, false. And then as I get close, should snap is true. And false, 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 should snap is true. All right. Okay, so this is looking good. So now what I need to do is I need to make sure that if I'm going to add the point, all right, and then if should snap is true, then what am I going to do here? I'm just going to basically close the polyline, all right, and do what I did before, which is create a shape, add all the vertices, the stroke color, the fill color, add that shape to the document, and then reset the array with the points, all right? Let's give this a try. So polyline 1, 2, 3. Wait, polyline 1, 2. Ooh, why am I not switching to the polyline? What have I done? Because yes, sorry. Polyline, let me reset. I had the caps lock on, so I was switching to pink color basically. So P, 1, 2, 3, and you can see that I only clicked and then that the polyline got added automatically. And if I go to doc, you can see that the polyline has been added permanently to the document model. All right. Now, what's weird though is that we can see this gap here. All right. And we don't want the gap. We want the point to snap perfectly to this. So what should we have done? Well, what we should have done is if should snap is true, then probably the point that I want to add, I'm going to cancel this. Probably the point that I want to add in that case is not where my mouse is, but it's basically a copy of the first point. So I'm going to add here the copy of the first point and a copy of the first point, and then I'm going to add the shape to the array, etc., etc. Otherwise, if it wasn't true, then I do add to the array, I basically add a point with my mouse X and my mouse Y coordinates. Okay, so let's see if this works. So I'm going to switch to polyline mode. 1, 2, 3, 4, and here you see that there's a little gap. I'm gonna click and boom, you see how it snapped into the place. 1, 2, 3, and boom, snap into place. 1, 2, 3. Beautiful! This is awesome! And I have in my document, I have my 4 shapes, the tiny ellipse that I did, and the 3 polylines that I just created. Fantastic! This is working great. Now, one tiny thing that I would like to do, this part of the code and the one that I had somewhere down here, yeah, when I press enter, these two are identical. And they're basically saying, push the polyline to the document, right? So because I don't want to have the same code in different places, this is really bad practice. It's much better to create a function just to do that. So I'm going to create a function here. I'm going to call this add poly to document, all right? And whenever I call this, I'm going to basically do this entire thing again. I'm going to say that polyline is this and the shape and blah, 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 whatever. Basically the same code that I had before. And now what I want to do is replace anywhere that I had this chunk of code with a call to this function. This makes the code much easier to maintain because I only have to change things in one place as opposed to multiple places. If I now want to make changes to how I add the polyline to the document, I only need to do it in one single place, right? So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and then enter, 1, 2, 3, enter, 1, 2, enter. And if I download this, I can open it, and where are my downloads here? And if I upload this, boom, my shape shows up in perfect. All right. Well, that was very cool. Is there anything else that I want to add for this? Let me think about this for a second. Well, the only thing that I would like to change is that I don't quite like hard-coded numbers. So if you remember when we calculated the distance between the last mouse click and the first point, I basically hard-coded 20 as the smallest distance, but I really don't like to do that. So I'm much more of the type of person who would like to create a constant here, for example, and this is going to be, for example, snap distance, right? And I'm going to call this 20. And it is common in JavaScript that when you declare a variable that you do not intend to ever change in value, you both make it a constant variable type, but at the same time, you uppercase the name of the variable. So I'm going to call this snap distance. I'm going to define it to 20, and this value will never change in the life of the program. And here I'm going to compare it to this so that if at some point I just want to change this number and make it 100 or make it 5, as the programmer of this app, I should have an easy way to do that, right? That this is what's typically referred to as writing programmatic code, or code that is very easy to readapt and reuse to different cases. All the other variables are not constant and are lowercase because most of these may change over the life of the program, the colors, the stroke widths, the shape types, etc., etc. Okay? All right, beautiful. I think with this, I feel very complete about this video and the new feature that we have added to our vector drawing app, which is the possibility of drawing polylines. I think I am very excited about this idea of like multiple vertex shape adding, whatever. So I wonder if the next video that we should record is drawing splines or drawing curves in a similar manner to what we've done here. Maybe that's what we're gonna do in the next video. Anyway, whatever it is, you will find it in the next video after this one in this playlist, web app drawing apps or something like that. Okay. Well, that was great. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you found it useful, maybe you want to like the video, subscribe to the channel, say hi on Discord, leave a comment, whatever that looks like for you. All right. Thanks a lot and see you on the next video, whatever that is. Bye bye.